Managing expectations is a critical skill for a financial transitionist. I originally created the Managing Expectation worksheets for widows, specifically widows in that deep stage of grief, in the early stages of their experience. The objective was to track the expectations of others, and in particular, adult children. But once we began using the tool, we saw that it applied across all life transition events and all stages. It was particularly helpful to help spouses understand each other's expectation. It is something that's wonderful for family inheritance issues, for selling a business, divorce, and even retirement. What makes expectations complicated is that they're frequently not verbalized. Furthermore, someone may or may not be correct in their perception of the expectations of others. Regardless, expectations can create an unseen but powerful undercurrent that influences relationships, behavior, and satisfaction. Managing expectations is universally applicable as an early tool because it's an opportunity to clarify the assumptions, and we all can use more clarity about our assumptions. Some of the usage tips here. Managing expectations was created for a specific situation with a widow. However, it clearly is important to all the other ones, including athletes, entertainers, and lottery winners, as they're surrounded, and suddenly or not, by people who want something from them or think they're entitled to do something, or the individual themselves think that they're supposed to be doing something that may or may not be in their best interest. You can also use it for any client in anticipation stage. And that's when stories start to form in people's heads about their expectations. And this is true for the person experiencing the event as well as those around them. Inheritors, regardless of when they learn about their inheritance, should be doing managing expectations. Couples who are making big decisions and have a lot that's left unsaid. Clients whose decision factor is really other people, or who haven't or have no way of speaking for those other people. So this is broad stuff. Expectations are rarely explicitly stated. Part of deep listening is being able to tease out the expectation of a client's narrative. We know that the story we carry, or the narrative that we carry, really starts to shape our life. So to help clients understand these elements of their narrative helps them shape the kind of life that they really want to be living. Financial advisors like to talk about goals because we're trained in how to craft them and create timelines and benchmarks. And advisors know what success looks like when dealing with goals. So goals are comfortable for us because they provide opportunities for us to give the client structure. But expectations are the spaces that exist in the narrative about goals. Some are vague, some are small, some are fleeting. Regardless, they're all important because they influence the thoughts and the behaviors of clients. Expectations shape narratives. So when you think about the usage here, we'd like to think about managing expectations as a proactive tool, particularly during anticipation. But in reality, all kinds of expectations and commitments might already be out there at any time, Here's when you know for sure, you know for certain that you need to enlist managing expectations as soon as possible, during anticipation stage, no matter what. For any life event, when it's clear that the client's decisions and actions take into account other people, and you haven't spoken to those other people. You might know the client's story about other people, but you really don't know the facts, and you may or may not be accurate in your assumptions. Next, when a client uses the word should frequently, or I assume, or they don't, but you need to add all of these words together to complete the sentence. For example, a client may say, when I get my inheritance, I'll be able to send my daughter to boarding school. The financial transitionist is always listening for assumptions and would add, I assume, to hear her client's statement, unless she knows that it's correct. With couples making important decisions that have details left unexplained, those details are essentially little spaces of uncertainty that could create financial and personal problems. So there are two layers to doing the managing expectation protocol. One is the client's personal expectation, and the other is the expectation of other people. So when you start with the personal managing expectations, start by asking timeline questions like, what do you think your life is going to look like a year from now, or a few years from now, or in the future? This isn't about goals, which have timelines and actions and are usually easy to talk about by most people. This is about the assumptions that they are taking for granted, but don't usually talk about. Most people don't even realize what their assumptions are. Assumptions reveal themselves in the answers to the follow-up questions. Why do you say that? How do you know that? Did she actually say that? Where were you when that happened? Has he argued or agreed about that? What do you think you need to do? Or simply tell me more. Always let the client finish their narrative prior to asking questions. This isn't an interrogation. You might be surprised by how many expectations you hear, and you have to wait until they're all done. Number two, restate what they've said and confirm assumptions and facts by asking follow-ups. Notes on what needs to be paid attention to, fact-checking, scenario testing, further exploration, or planning all need to be taken into consideration. Remember that not all expectations are problematic. Expectation conversations may be a confirmation that your client is on the right track and is doing very well. And if so, be sure to point out what's working well. The clarification of expectations may help you with planning recommendations. It's great when you find that couples are on the same page. And you'll see with the example I'm going to give in a few minutes that some think they're on the same page, but they're really not. And if you can catch that early, you can help them stay in a solid way on the same page. You may find that the expectations of, say, adult children for a widow are really healthy and wonderful. They're not always something that's bad. So be sure to notice, validate, and sometimes even celebrate when the expectations are spot on and are constructive and built on confidence and reality. The expectations of others are similar but different. So when you move to the expectations of other people, could be family, friends, other professional advisors would be part of this as well. We all live in an interconnected and interconnected world where connections actually matter. When your clients' lives are changing, their connections with other people and centers of influence tend to change. Some become more intense, some become more important, some need to be put on hold, and some become detrimental. Your intention is better understood. Your intention is to better understand what's on your client's mind and what's important to them. Working through this tool will help you lower your anxiety level, and it will provide an orderly way for you to address pressures that they feel from other people. It also provides an opportunity for other influences in their lives, including other advisors, to understand the process that they are in with you. On a side note, it's interesting to understand the expectations and the view of other advisors in your clients' lives. I remember back in the days when I was a practitioner, being really surprised at what some of the business lawyers that were working with my clients thought of my clients and thought would happen. Some of the estate planning attorneys had big stories in their heads about their widowed client inheriting certain kinds of assets and their ability to manage things. So the expectations of outside advisors can be important. It might be difficult to give them this protocol, but you could ask some probing questions and have a discussion with them and just learn what it is that they're thinking. In some cases, you'll be able to maybe set the record straight. I remember at one point, a CPA advising a widow who had complex assets that she had inherited. He basically said that the oil and gas leases and the patents and all of that really didn't matter because she'd be getting about 9% on her bonds. This is in an environment where 5% on bonds was pretty much realistic. So he had an assumption that she would have almost double the income from her bond portfolio that was real, which gave him less concern to clarify and to clean up some of the situations with some of the other assets. I actually had to show him that the 5% was a real and probably somewhat aggressive assumption. So it doesn't mean that they're wrong or they're bad, but it does mean that their assumptions can influence their advice. So just one more tip on the side about managing expectations. So the objective of managing the expectations of other people is to lighten the load on the mind by putting all expectations on paper. This includes the known and the perceived ones, however small they are. Provide relief by giving the client the opportunity to think about their feelings regarding each expectations with someone who understands their financial picture. Provide them with a statement for each person on their list when it's needed, and protect relationships that are important to them. We're trying to help people have a successful transition from what was to what will be. And that just takes years. You can't rush it. It may be 4 years instead of 7 years. It may be 3 years instead of 5 years. Usually it's 5 or more. And during that time, there's many financial aspects and technical aspects, but the personal relationships are important too. And this expectations protocol can help you help your clients maintain good, solid relationships with the people that matter to them, the people that are important parts of their well-being. So here's some protocol that I think we should pay attention to. Number one, similar to the process for personal expectations, your questioning is along the lines of, is there anyone who you believe has expectations of your time, your assets, your home, legal or accounting work, or any of your resources? Listen carefully to their narrative. Make a list of the expectations in your head. Ask follow-up questions as needed. You may or may not ever need to meet any of these people that your client's talking about. So fact-checking your client's assumptions about those people and those people's assumptions might really not be possible. It's likely that what you're dealing with here is how the client feels about the expectations of others and whether they agree with those expectations or are responsible for them or have anything to contribute to them. Ask plenty of questions that follow up about how they feel about it. Is that okay with you? How does that feel? How would it feel if that wasn't there? It's always nice to ask the opposite question too, that use that contrast tool that we talked about in communication preference. Number two, as you have questions, you'll get a sense of the importance of tracking expectations. The listing and organizing done in the chart is designed to identify difficulties and challenges, as well as establish benchmarks for progress. Number three, Determine whether the client needs to craft a statement with their intentions, something that's customized for each party. One umbrella statement might not be appropriate for everyone. The statement helps a client maintain important relationships without feeling compelled to give in to the expectations, or to not speak to someone because they don't know how to deal with their expectations. So some coaching tips for managing expectation. One is to keep the personal expectations and the expectations of others separate. Even if you have to do 2 short lists, always keep them separate. Number 2, have spouses and partners do the exercise on their own and then use the sheets from the couples to consolidate and note differences and note things that they do share, areas that where they are solidly on the same track. Number 3, in many cases, it's helpful to write a general statement addressing other people. Otherwise, customize as necessary. 4, your job is to help the client manage relationships by giving people the message that they're in good hands with a professional, someone who is specifically trained in managing change, particularly financial change. Number 5, you may know the client well enough to make the questions very personal. Otherwise, keep it general and let them fill in their own words. 6, customize the chart by adding columns and rows and changing the column titles. 7, repeat the exercise as necessary and add to it at the annual agenda, for the annual meeting agenda as a check-in or as an update. Number 8, when there's a clear expectation tied to an identified goal, make sure you keep this information in your system so you can see it. This will help you keep it in mind as you make other recommendations. Now for adherence and implementation tips from Dr. Moira Summers. She says the managing expectation process was explicitly designed to address both the client's internal drivers and external social forces. These are forces that frequently contribute to non-adherence and regret. The use of the tool, as well as some of the other tools, can prove to be emotionally evocative for both the client and the financial transitionist. The tools can bring to light a client's explicit values as well as hidden money scripts. These may be profoundly different from yours in some ways or very similar to others. As a result, success in using it is particularly dependent on the emotional intelligence of the financial transitionist. This includes not only the ability to deal with the client's emotion, but also with your own. The main function of managing expectations tool is to uncover unstated expectations and assumptions so that they can be addressed effectively. In the process, clients reveal a lot about themselves and their network to you. It's not uncommon for private yearning and long-standing family tensions to be discussed openly, maybe for the first time. This can leave some clients feeling a little exposed or stirred up in your presence. The emotionally intelligent financial transitionist is able to address this reality skillfully through such things as periodically restating the immediate and the long-term benefits of dealing with the expectations. Normalizing how messy and complicated it can feel to reflect upon or enumerate all of the expectations that surround them during their transition. Checking in with them regarding how they're feeling during the process. In turn, such a glimpse into the inner workings of families can provoke strong feelings in you. Things such as jealousy, pity, disapproval, anger, or disdain. It can trigger painful memories and spark powerful longings of your own. This is normal and to be expected. You'll grow personally and professionally as you develop skills in noticing what gets stirred up in you. And in ensuing, what you can do to not allow these things to detract from the client's process. The skill can be enhanced by such things as making it a point of noticing your bodily reactions. Are you tense? Are you tight across the chest? Does your head hurt? Is your stomach burning? This check-in takes you just a few seconds, and it can change, and it can happen discreetly in the middle of a session while the client is thinking or writing something down. Once the appointment is over, take a few minutes to do a slightly longer check-in for yourself. You don't have to make it an effort to change those bodily sensations. Instead, just pay attention to where this is showing up in your body and what they feel like. It can be paradoxical, but deliberately leaning into such a sensation allows you to do their work and allows them, that emotion, to do its work and settle more quickly than if you repeatedly try to ignore or to change them. Next, she says, identifying your own memories that have been triggered or the stories you've been telling yourself in response to the client's disclosures. You may become aware that you stop listening momentarily. You may find that you are assigning blame or taking sides as you begin to elaborate internally on what the client is telling you. Gently and persistently bring yourself back to what the client is telling you. Third, she says, making a commitment to your own continued growth and well-being. What you encountered in yourself through the course of doing this work, your yearning, your regrets, your values, can be opportunities for healing and needed change. You may want to consider working with a coach or a therapist who can help you support in addressing some of these problems and creating a kind of personal and professional life that you really want. Okay, so that information from Dr. Moira is always helpful, and it's lovely when she helps us see into ourselves, not just to be the guide for the client. As we grow, our skills grow. So first, we're going to go over part one of managing personal expectations. And here's the story. This is the story of Anne-Marie and Hans. And they come to you learning that her parents are going to be giving her a large portion of the proceeds of the sale of their business. The amount seems to be large enough, so the couple is starting to make some changes. The event hasn't happened yet, and the actual amount has not been discovered quite yet. But it does seem that it's going to happen, and it will be large. They're grateful, and they're excited, and they want to start planning right away. They've managed their personal finances well, but without the large gift, they would have to keep working for another 12 years. So this is an important gift. This makes them, or creates the possibility for them to retire and follow their dreams now. So as part of the initial meeting with them, they're in anticipation stage. You talk to them about the value of exploring their expectations as well as their goals. They explain that they share the same goals: to leave their careers and move to a ski town to open a fitness center for seniors. And even though they seem to be aligned regarding their goals, they may have some different assumptions about how this transition will occur. Learning about the differences in advance will help them make the transition a little bit easier and more enjoyable, let's face it. It will also help decrease confusion and disappointment and allow you to tailor a plan that addresses the expectations of both of them. So, and you've had the initial meeting, you've explained the importance of doing this and the value to them, why it's relevant, and you customize their expectation chart, and you send 2 copies in an email following the meeting, and you ask them to each do their own version and bring them to the next meeting. You ask them, if possible, to send them back to you before the next meeting. So now at the second meeting, you can point out where they are aligned and where they're not. And they have time to think about it. This hasn't happened yet. You can do some real constructive work with these clients before the event takes place. So this is what their charts look like. It was a simple chart. The columns were what, when, and why. What do you expect, when, and why? And when you have this in advance, it's easy for you to highlight, and here we did it in red, but you can highlight either the differences or things that are the same, or somehow make it visually interactive with the client when you set it down and you start that second meeting. So what is shown here is anything in red is where they differ. So Anne-Marie says her what is to sell her house, buy a big one in the mountains. When is in 6 months of the event. And why? Well, because we've always talked about it and now we can do it. If not now, when? Pretty simple. Next, it was to buy a building for the fitness center and create our own business and do that within the year. And the why is we've always dreamed of how our building would look and how it would function. We need to be able to renovate and design it. We need to make it our own. Her next goal was to hire trainers and coaches so that they're ready when they open. We need to have the best professionals to attract the right clients. Next on the list is get the kids to come up often and eventually join the business as soon as possible, as soon as they came. And the why is it would be fun to have a family business. And then the last on her list was to bring the parents to live with them if they need it. In other words, have space for them. I don't want to have to go back to my hometown to make sure that they're okay. She'd rather have them there. So Hans says, sell the business and buy in the mountains. And he wants to stay conservative. He wants to take their time. He says, it's our dream to live in the mountains, but we have to make sure that we can afford to live there. Next on the list is to rent a small space. And he wants to do that, that's for the fitness center, after the house is bought. And he wants to build the clientele first and move up slowly. He thinks that they should both get certified as trainers and coaches. And they should start now, even before the event, taking courses. And he says, we're naturally good at this. The last on his list is have room for the kids, but not too much room. They need to make their own lives, and we need our privacy. So they are similar, but they are different. And the main point with this is that they both thought the other was on the same page. So you can see how this would influence some relationships. One relationship with the children. One is to say, you know, as soon as you can, come on up and work in the family business. And the other is saying, no, that's not it. That could influence the children's choices of career or buying homes or within their own marriages. The trainer thing, she wants to hire people and he wants to be a certified trainer and a coach. Those again are very different. One, you could start right now and start moving towards a goal. She wants to buy the building. He wants to rent a small space. She wants a big house. He wants to stay conservative. You can see how they would drive the real estate people in this new town they're moving to crazy. And they could be frustrated with each other. And the point is, none of this has to happen. They're in a great space. They're able to fulfill their dream. They just have the opportunity now to fine-tune that dream so that they think about each other's desires and they blend their two lists here. So for this, you'd obviously want them to take some more time and to think about things. You, as their financial transitionist, might be coaching them on getting some of these things settled. Many of these things are more personal choice. You might be doing some numbers on housing and that sort of thing, but you've helped them identify their expectations and you help them prevent some stress and unnecessary discomfort at minimum when the event's actually happening. So this is what their worksheets looked like. It's pretty simple, straightforward form. And you know that you can have these co-branded, so it has your company name. You keep logo and copyright on it, but it can be co-branded. But I also said in the coaching tips to customize the title of the column. And this is pretty straightforward, what, when, and why. You might have a how much in there. You might have something else that's specific to the client, or start with this and go forward. So now let's take a look at a part 2, which is managing the expectations of others. You can ask the questions and start off that way, or you can use something like this about who else is involved in what's going on. How will important relationships be impacted? What needs to be done to protect relationships? What are your sources of advice, professional and personal? Are there entities that you feel you need to include in your thinking? Thinking more charitable right there, or nonprofits. How will you test financial impacts? And how will you handle pushback or pressure when you delay or refuse to meet expectations? These are good starter questions. You might customize it if you wanted to, but this will get you where you're going if you needed a way to start to personalize this experience for them. Why should they be looking at the expectations of other people? So here's a story. It's the sample from a widow in the early stages of grief. And this is the classic that we were using in the early days. As I said, this was created originally for widows, for expectations of other people. So the columns here on the managing expectations chart there are more of them. It's who, what, why, when, and how do I feel about it? So in her case, the first who is the son-in-law. What he wants to do is take over the finances. Why? Because he wants to help. When? As soon as possible. How do I feel about it? Well, the client said she appreciates the offer, but she's not really ready to sign over control. Next on the list was the minister. He wants a donation in the memory of Sam, her husband. Why? Well, because Sam would want to be remembered that way. And when? Soon, but no hurry. And how does she feel about it? Well, maybe some donation after I get more focused. Third on the list is the grandson. He wants the husband's car, grandpa's car. Why? Because it's better and nicer than his own. And when? Well, it could be any time. And how do I feel about it? Well, it's a good idea, but I need to wait a few weeks. And then last on the list in her case was a sister-in-law who needs medical support. And it's continued medical support. And the when is it's ongoing. But the feeling is that she felt like she wants to do this, but she needs to understand it more. She needs to explore what the responsibility is and what the possibilities are. So this doesn't just happen like this. Obviously, there's a conversation. And it may not be a 1, 2, 3, 4 conversation. It can be meandering. Any one of these can blossom into a long story. It could be, in the case of the car, she talked about how she likes seeing in the garage. She likes seeing her husband's hat on the seat where he always left it. And then that might be a story about when the car was purchased or where they went in the car. And part of your job is to listen and to allow for that kind of discourse. It's bonding, it's healing, it's informative, and it helps the client know that you know some of the important things about her life. Now, in this case, when you have listened to the stories and you've helped to put it into a format like this, this case, the way it happened, and I envision in most cases, you'd be talking to the client, you would have this in front of you, and you'd start to take some notes. So you could consolidate it and make it concise and take that story about the car and the grandson and put it all on one line, nice and simple like that. But if you were just kind of taking orders and putting down the words, they don't have the same feeling behind it. All the words on something like this have some emotion, some feeling, some concern, some love, some confusion, some appreciation behind it. And that is part of the experience of doing this with the client. So the follow-up in this case is to have some quick notes at the bottom, some call to action. So the first one was, my son-in-law needs to know that I have things under control for now, and we'll meet together with the planner in a few months. And at some point, I'll call my grandson to pick up the car. Right now, I like to see it in the garage. She might want to tell the grandson that it's just not now. It's not no, it's just not now. Next is, my minister needs to know that he's correct. Sam would want me to make a donation, but not until I really understand my finances. I'll tell him it might be a year from now. So think about that. Think about the going to church was important, a very important part of her life. She and her husband went to the same church for a long time, part of the congregation. And she's starting to feel uncomfortable thinking that the minister wants a donation now. So she's tending to avoid him a little bit. Not really consciously, but as she went through this, she realized that she would sometimes go out another door, or she would be talking with friends and not stop talking when, you know, he was available to talk or wanted to say hello. So she was ignoring him a bit. But by telling him this and having that conversation, she frees up any anxiety that she has, and he understands what's happening. It's just healthy. And then the last thing is about the sister-in-law. For now, I'll continue what Sam has given to my sister-in-law. Then I need to find out more information and make a long-term plan for her with her doctors and my planner to help. So it's good for the sister-in-law to know that that will continue and that she's just simply trying to understand it all, and involving the doctor and maybe involving the sister-in-law. So it's not something that has a dark shadow that grows darker as it goes, particularly when it doesn't have to. So these are two examples. One of this is a sample sheet for you. Again, you can customize this as you would like to customize it. So these are the samples that you have for the charts or the tables. And here's a sample of one of the statements. Sometimes when things happen, people that surround your client may have concerns, and one concern might be you. And it might be they're afraid that that person is vulnerable and that you're going to take advantage of them, or that you don't really know, that they're not going to get good advice, or that they really don't have anyone. So however it is, this is a sample. This was one that was written for a different kind of case. I'm working with a certified financial transitionist, a professional who's trained to help widows like me. The first step I've taken is to agree not to make any unnecessary decisions until I've gone through the process of organizing, figuring out what's possible, and looking into different ways to manage my resources. Once I get through this first phase, I'll review your suggestion or your request and see how it fits. Right now, we just don't know what's possible. I'm not ready to make decisions on anything that's not absolutely essential. Managing this loss is difficult, and I'm relieved to be going slowly in the beginning. You see, it's the kind of statement that nobody could argue with. They might want to check you out. Your website should be able to give people the kind of information they'd be looking for. But everyone would want someone to be going slowly when they're in a state of confusion, and it's difficult. So here are some questions that you could go over with the client to test out what should be in the statement. In the widow's case that we had talked about in detail with the grandson and the sister-in-law, they really just needed to be informed. But sometimes you do need to have a full written case. So you might have them writing out some of the things that need to be in their managing expectation statements. So that's what this page is about there.